I was sitting at my kitchen table sorting through the mail when I found an envelope from a law firm I didn't recognize. My name was typed across the front in that cold, impersonal way legal documents always look, and something about it made my hands shake before I even opened it. I'm Victoria, I'm 52 years old, and until that moment, I thought I knew exactly what my life was. But when I pulled out those papers and saw the word divorce in bold letters at the top, my whole world tilted sideways. The room started spinning, and I had to grip the edge of the table to steady myself. Divorce papers, with my signature right there at the bottom in what looked exactly like my handwriting. But I had never signed anything. I had never even talked about divorce. My husband Marcus and I had been married for 28 years. We had our problems, sure, what couple doesn't? But divorce? That word had never come out of either of our mouths. I sat there staring at those papers, feeling like I was looking at my own life through a stranger's eyes. The signature was perfect, every loop, every curve, exactly the way I sign my name on checks and birthday cards and work documents. But I swear, on everything I love, I had never seen these papers before in my life. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears, and my hands wouldn't stop shaking. Marcus was at work. He left every morning at 7:30 and came home at 6, like clockwork, for the past 15 years, working as an accountant at a firm downtown. We had a routine: dinner at 7, TV until 9, then bed. We weren't passionate anymore, but we were comfortable, or at least I thought we were. Now I was holding evidence that suggested our entire marriage might be a lie. I pulled out my phone to call him, but my fingers hovered over his contact photo for a long moment. What was I going to say? "Hey, honey, did you file for divorce without telling me?" It sounded insane, even in my head. But the papers were right there in front of me, dated 3 weeks ago, filed with the county clerk's office, stamped and official looking as anything I'd ever seen. Instead of calling, I started reading through the documents, every single page. My reading glasses kept sliding down my nose from the sweat that was forming on my face, despite the air conditioning being on full blast. The paper said I was petitioning for divorce, citing irreconcilable differences. They listed our assets: the house we bought 23 years ago when Kenya was 5, the 2 cars, the joint bank accounts, the retirement funds, everything we'd built together over nearly 3 decades. But here's what really made my blood run cold. The papers said I wanted sole ownership of the house, that I was requesting Marcus move out within 30 days, and that I was willing to split the retirement accounts 50-50 but wanted to keep my teacher's pension separate. I teach 5th grade at Lincoln Elementary, and my pension is the one thing I've worked for that's entirely mine. Except, I never said any of this. I never wanted any of this. I got it from the table and started pacing around my kitchen, the same kitchen where Marcus and I had shared thousands of meals, where we'd celebrated birthdays and holidays, where we'd had late-night conversations about our dreams and fears. The morning sun was coming through the window over the sink, hitting the ceramic rooster collection I'd been building since we got married, and suddenly, those roosters looked like they were mocking me. My phone rang, and I nearly jumped out of my skin. It was my best friend Denise. We'd known each other since college, been through everything together. "Girl, you sound weird. What's wrong?" she said the moment I answered. "I can't even explain it," I said, my voice cracking. "I found divorce papers, Denise. Papers with my signature, but I never signed them." There was silence on the other end. Then Denise said in that calm voice she uses when things are really bad, "Victoria, baby, I'm coming over right now. Don't do anything until I get there." But I couldn't just sit there waiting. I went to our bedroom, the room Marcus and I had shared for over 2 decades, and started looking through his things. I felt guilty going through his dresser drawers, his closet, his nightstand, but that guilt was nothing compared to the fear that was eating me alive. What else didn't I know? What else had been happening right under my nose? In the back of his closet, behind his winter coats, I found a box I'd never seen before. It was just a plain brown box, the kind you'd get from an office supply store, but when I opened it, my hands started shaking all over again. Inside were bank statements for an account I didn't know existed, an account in Marcus's name only, and the balance made me dizzy. Over $200,000. I sat right there on the closet floor, surrounded by Marcus's shoes and suits. My husband had been hiding money from me. A lot of money. And suddenly, the divorce papers made a different kind of sense. Maybe he wasn't the one being deceived. Maybe I was the one who'd been living in a fantasy while he planned his escape. The bank statements went back 5 years. 5 years of monthly deposits ranging from $2,000 to $10,000. Money that should have been going into our joint accounts, money that should have been helping us pay down the mortgage or save for Kenya's future or any of the 100 things we always said we didn't have enough money for. And all this time, Marcus had been building his own private fortune. I heard the front door open and Denise calling my name. "I'm in the bedroom," I shouted back, my voice sounding hollow and far away. Denise found me still sitting on the closet floor with the bank statements spread around me like evidence at a crime scene. She took one look at my face and then at the papers, and she said, "Oh, Victoria. Oh, honey." We moved back to the kitchen table where the divorce papers were still sitting like a bomb that had already gone off. Denise made coffee even though it was already hot enough outside to fry an egg on the sidewalk, and I told her everything. About the signature that looked exactly like mine, about the bank account with over $200,000, and about how Marcus had been acting completely normal this whole time. Denise sat across from me, her dark eyes full of the kind of anger that comes from watching someone you love get hurt. She's a lawyer, specializing in family law, which is probably why I called her first, before even confronting Marcus. She picked up the divorce papers and started reading through them carefully, making little humming sounds that I knew meant she was finding things that bothered her. "Victoria," she said after a long silence, "this signature, it's really good. If you didn't sign these papers, then someone went to a lot of trouble to make it look like you did. This isn't just a scribble. This is nearly perfect forgery." "Who would do that?" I asked, even though I already knew the answer. Denise looked at me with sad eyes. "Marcus would? That's who has the most to gain here. He's got a hidden bank account with $200,000. He's got divorce papers that make it look like you initiated the split, so he comes out looking like the victim, and he's got access to your signature on probably hundreds of documents over the years." "But why?" I asked, my voice breaking. "Why not just ask me for a divorce like an adult? Why go through all this?" "That's what we need to find out," Denise said, pulling out her phone. "I'm calling a forensic document examiner. I know someone who can analyze this signature and determine if it's really yours. We need to move fast, though. If these papers were filed 3 weeks ago, the clock is already ticking." While Denise made her calls, I sat there trying to remember the past few weeks. Had Marcus been acting differently? Had there been signs I missed? He'd been working late more often, but he'd always worked late sometimes. He'd been distant, but he'd been distant on and off for years. Now that I thought about it, he'd been taking more phone calls in the other room, stepping outside to talk, going to the garage for privacy. But when I asked, he always said it was work stuff, boring, accounting things I wouldn't be interested in. And I believed him. God, I believed every word. Because why wouldn't I? This was Marcus, the man who cried at our wedding, who held my hand through 14 hours of labor when Kenya was born, who sat with me in the hospital when my mother died 3 years ago. This was my husband, my partner, the person who was supposed to have my back until death do us part. Denise hung up and looked at me with determination. "Okay, I've got an appointment for you tomorrow morning with the document examiner. And Victoria, you need to not say anything to Marcus yet. I know that's going to be hard, but we need more information before you confront him." "How am I supposed to sit across from him tonight and pretend everything's fine?" I asked. "You're going to do it because you're strong, and because you need to protect yourself. If Marcus has been planning this for years, and it looks like he has, then he's several steps ahead of you. We need to catch up." At 6:15, I heard Marcus's car pull into the driveway. My whole body tensed up, like I was preparing for a fight. But when he walked through the door, he was the same Marcus he'd always been. Slightly rumpled suit, loosened tie, that tired smile he always wore after a long day. "Hey, Vicky," he said, using the nickname he'd called me since we first started dating. "How was your day?" "It was fine," I lied, my voice sounding surprisingly normal. "How was yours?" Same old," he said, dropping his briefcase by the door. "Just boring numbers all day.
You know how that is. I made your favorite, I said, pointing to the pot roast in the oven, even though the smell of it was making me nauseous. Fried chicken and mac and cheese. Marcus's face lit up. Really? That's great, babe. Thank you. Let me just go change real quick. I watched him walk down the hallway to our bedroom, the same bedroom where I'd found his secret bank statements, and I wondered how long he'd been lying to me. Was it just the past 5 years, or had our entire marriage been built on deception? Had he ever really loved me, or had I just been convenient, a stable presence while he built his secret life? Dinner was torture. We sat across from each other at the dining room table, the same table where we'd had thousands of meals, and Marcus talked about his day like nothing was wrong. He told me about a difficult client, about his coworker Brian, who was getting divorced, about how the traffic was terrible on the way home. And the whole time, I was thinking, you filed for divorce. You forged my signature. You've been hiding money from me for 5 years. Are you okay? He asked at one point. You seem quiet. Just tired, I said, pushing mac and cheese around my plate. Long day with the kids. You know how 5th graders can be right before summer break. Marcus nodded sympathetically. I bet they're climbing the walls, huh? Just a few more weeks, though. Then you'll have the whole summer off. Yeah, the whole summer off to figure out why my husband is trying to destroy my life. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay next to Marcus in our bed, listening to him snore softly, and I felt like I was sleeping next to a stranger. I kept thinking about all the nights we'd spent in this bed, all the conversations and arguments and moments of intimacy, and I wondered how much of it had been real. At 3 in the morning, I got up and went to the kitchen. I made myself chamomile tea and sat at the table with the divorce papers spread out in front of me. I studied my signature, trying to see any difference between it and my real signature, but it was perfect. Whoever had forged it, whether it was Marcus or someone he'd hattered, had done an incredible job. The next morning, I called in sick to school for the first time in 3 years, told them I had a stomach bug and needed a substitute. Marcus left for work at his usual time, and as soon as his car pulled out of the driveway, I was in my own car heading to meet with the document examiner Denise had arranged. Dr. Helen Morrison's office was in a tall building downtown, the kind with marble floors and expensive art on the walls. She was a woman in her 60s, with silver hair pulled back in a tight bun and sharp eyes that seemed to see everything. Denise had already sent her copies of the divorce papers, and she had them laid out on a light table when I arrived. Mrs. Anderson, she said, shaking my hand, I've had a chance to preliminarily examine these documents, and I have to say, this is one of the more sophisticated forgeries I've seen in my 30 years doing this work. So it is forged? I said, feeling a strange mix of relief and horror. Dr. Morrison adjusted her glasses and pointed to the signature with a pen. The pressure points are slightly different from authentic samples of your signature that your lawyer provided. See here and here. The forger did an excellent job matching the overall flow and style, but under magnification, you can see where they hesitated, where they were copying rather than writing naturally. Can you prove it in court? Absolutely, Dr. Morrison said. I'll prepare a full report with photographic evidence and expert testimony if needed. But, Mrs. Anderson, I have to tell you, whoever did this had extensive access to your signature. They studied it carefully. This wasn't a quick scribble. This took time and practice. My hands were shaking again. It had to be Marcus. Who else had that kind of access to my signature? Who else would benefit from making it look like I wanted the divorce? There's something else, Dr. Morrison said, pulling out another document. The filing date on these papers is 3 weeks ago, but the paper stock and the printer metadata suggest they were actually prepared about 2 months ago. Someone sat on these for weeks before filing them. Why would they do that? I asked. Dr. Morrison shook her head. That's not my area of expertise, but if I had to guess, I'd say they were waiting for something. Maybe for you to be out of town or for some other piece of their plan to fall into place. I left Dr. Morrison's office with a USB drive containing her preliminary findings and a promise that she'd have the full report ready within a week. Denise was waiting for me in the parking garage, and I could tell from her face that she had news, too. I did some digging, she said, as we sat in her car. Marcus has been meeting with a divorce attorney. His name is Richard Stiles. He's known for being aggressive and for representing high-net-worth individuals in contentious divorces. How did you find that out? I asked. I have my sources, Denise said with a grim smile. But Victoria, there's more. I pulled the court records. Marcus not just filed these divorce papers, he also filed a motion for temporary exclusive use of the house. He's claiming that you've been verbally abusive to him and that he needs space for his mental health. My mouth dropped open. That's insane. I've never been abusive to anyone in my life. I know that, Denise said, but he's building a narrative. Here's what I think is happening. He forged your signature on the divorce papers to make it look like you initiated the split. Then he filed a counter motion painting himself as the victim who needs to be protected from you. Meanwhile, he's got $200,000 hidden away that you didn't know about until yesterday. But why? I asked for the 100th time. Why go through all this? Denise took a deep breath. Money, Victoria. It's always about money. If he can make this look like your fault, if he can claim emotional abuse, if he can portray himself as the injured party, then he's got a better chance of keeping more of the assets, especially that hidden bank account. We need to confront him. Not yet, Denise said. We need to be strategic. We need to gather more evidence. We need to make sure we have everything we need to prove what he's done. Because once you confront him, Victoria, he's going to know that you know, and he's going to go on the defensive. That afternoon, I did something I never thought I'd do. I hired a private investigator. Denise recommended a woman named Sarah Chen, who specialized in marital infidelity and financial investigations. Sarah was young, maybe in her early 30s, with short black hair and an intensity that made me trust her immediately. Mrs. Anderson, Sarah said, when we met at her office, I've looked over the information your attorney sent me, and I have to say, this case has a lot of red flags. Your husband has been very careful, very methodical, but everyone makes mistakes. My job is to find those mistakes. What do you need from me? I asked. I need you to act completely normal. Go home, have dinner with your husband, go to work tomorrow like nothing has happened. Meanwhile, I'm going to follow him. I'm going to track his movements, his phone calls, his meetings. I'm going to find out what else he's hiding. Because trust me, if he's got one secret bank account, he probably has more. The next few days were the hardest of my life. I went to school and taught my fifth graders about fractions and state history. I came home and made dinner. I sat next to Marcus on the couch and watched television. I did everything exactly the way I'd always done it, but inside, I was screaming.
Sarah called me every evening after Marcus was asleep to give me updates. The first night, she followed him from work to a restaurant where he met with his divorce attorney. The second night, he went to the gym, but Sarah noticed he spent more time on his phone in the locker room than actually working out. The third night, he drove to a house I didn't recognize in a neighborhood across town and stayed there for 2 hours. "Whose house is that?" I asked Sarah, my heart pounding. "I'm working on that," Sarah said, "but I got photos of him going in and coming out, and Victoria, he looked comfortable there, like he'd been there before." On the fourth day, Sarah called me at work, which she'd never done before. I stepped out of my classroom during lunch to take the call. "Victoria, I found something," Sarah said, "and you need to sit down." "I'm already sitting," I lied, even though I was standing in the hallway outside my classroom. "Your husband has a second phone," Sarah said. "I've been tracking his movements, and I noticed he was making and receiving calls that weren't showing up on your family phone plan. So I did some digging and found another number registered to a shell company that traces back to Marcus." "Why would he need a second phone?" I asked, even though I already knew the answer had nothing to do with work. I've been monitoring that number for the past 24 hours, Sarah said. And Victoria, he's been calling the same number repeatedly, a woman's number. I've identified her as Amanda Stevens. She's 32 years old, works as a paralegal at a law firm, not the one your husband uses, but another firm downtown. My legs gave out and I had to lean against the wall. Marcus was having an affair. That's what this was all about. Not just money, not just wanting a fresh start. He'd found someone else, someone younger, and he was trying to get rid of me in a way that would cost him the least amount of money and dignity. There's more, Sarah said, and her voice was gentle, like she was trying to cushion a blow. I followed him to that house again last night, the one across town. Victoria, it's Amanda's house. He's been staying there several nights a week, telling you he's working late. How long? I managed to ask. How long has this been going on? Based on the phone records? At least 2 years. I'm sorry, Victoria, I know this isn't what you wanted to hear. I hung up the phone and stood in that empty hallway at Lincoln Elementary, where I'd worked for 20 years, and I let myself feel it all. The betrayal, the humiliation, the rage, the grief for what I thought my marriage was. 2 years. Marcus had been living a double life for 2 years, coming home to me, acting like everything was fine while he built a whole other existence with Amanda Stevens. I called Denise. Victoria, honey, Sarah just called me. I'm so sorry. I know, I said, my voice surprisingly steady. I know. And I'm done being strategic. I'm done waiting for more evidence. I'm confronting him tonight. Are you sure? Denise asked. We could wait until we have everything. I'm sure, I said. I need to look him in the eye and hear him try to explain this. That evening, I got home before Marcus for once. I'd left school right after the final bell instead of staying late to grade papers like I usually did. I set the table for dinner, made his favorite meal again, fried chicken and mac and cheese, and I put the divorce papers in the center of the table, right next to the salt and pepper shakers. When Marcus walked through the door at 6:15, he was smiling. Hey, Vicky, something smells good. We need to talk, I said, my voice cold. Marcus's smile faltered. What's wrong? I pointed to the divorce papers on the table. You want to tell me about those? The color drained from his face. He opened his mouth, then closed it, then opened it again. Those aren't... I didn't... You didn't what? I interrupted. Forge my signature? Steal $200,000? Hide it in a secret bank account? Have an affair with Amanda Stevens for the past 2 years? Lie to me every day while you planned your escape? Marcus stumbled backward, like I'd physically hit him. Vicky, I can explain. Explain? I said, my voice rising. Explain how you forged legal documents? Explain how you made me look like the one who wanted this divorce? Explain how you've been sleeping with another woman for 2 years while I waited up for you, wondering why you were working so late? It's not what you think, Marcus started, but I cut him off. It's exactly what I think. And I have proof, Marcus. I have a forensic document examiner who can prove that signature isn't mine. I have bank records. I have photos of you at Amanda's house. I have phone records showing thousands of calls and texts between you two. I have everything. Marcus's face went from pale to red. Victoria, you hired someone to follow me? You invaded my privacy. I invaded your privacy? I was almost laughing now. You forged my signature on divorce papers? You hid money? You cheated on me? But I'm the one who invaded your privacy? How long have you known? He asked. And there was something in his voice that made me even angrier, like he was trying to figure out how much damage control he needed to do. Long enough, I said. And here's what's going to happen. You're going to move out. Tonight. Not in 30 days like your fake divorce papers say. Tonight. You're going to take whatever clothes and personal items you need, and you're going to leave. You can't kick me out of my own house. This is my house too. Actually, according to your divorce papers, the ones with my forged signature, I get sole ownership of the house. So unless you want me to file criminal charges for forgery, you're going to do exactly what I say.
Marcus stared at me like he'd never seen me before. This isn't you, Vicky. You're not vindictive. You're not cruel. You're right, I said. I'm not cruel, but I'm also not going to let you destroy my life and get away with it. You made your choice, Marcus. You chose Amanda. You chose to lie and cheat and steal. Now you get to live with those choices. What about Kenya? He asked. What are we going to tell her? We're going to tell her the truth, that you're a liar and a cheater and that you destroyed our family. Marcus's eyes filled with tears. Please, Vicky, we can work this out. We can go to counseling. We can fix this. Fix this? I repeated. There's nothing to fix, Marcus. You didn't just make a mistake. You planned this. You premeditated every step. You forged legal documents. You hid money. You had an affair for 2 years. This wasn't a moment of weakness. This was a calculated decision to betray me in every way possible. What about the money? The money in the account you found? What about it? I said. It's my money. I earned it. I saved it. You earned it during our marriage, which makes it marital property. You don't get to hide assets, Marcus. That's illegal. And when this goes to court, and it will go to court now that I'm actually filing for divorce, you're going to have to account for every penny. Marcus grabbed his keys from the counter. I'll go stay at a hotel. You do that. Or you could go stay with Amanda. I'm sure she'd love to have you full-time now. He looked at me one more time, and I could see he wanted to say something else, wanted to defend himself or apologize, or maybe try to manipulate me one more time. But I just stared back at him with all the anger and hurt and betrayal I was feeling. And finally, he turned and walked out the door. I stood there in my kitchen, alone, for the first time in my house in over 25 years, and I felt something unexpected. I felt free. Yes, there was pain and anger and grief. But underneath all of that was a sense of liberation from lies and deception and a marriage that had clearly been dead for years, even though I didn't know it. I called Kenya, my daughter. She was 23, working at a marketing firm in Atlanta, living her own life. She answered on the second ring. Hey, Mom, what's up? I need to tell you something. And I told her everything. About the divorce papers, the forged signature, the secret bank account, Amanda Stevens, all of it. Kenya listened without interrupting, and when I finished, there was a long silence. Mom, I'm so sorry. I'm coming home. You don't have to do that, I said. I'm okay. You're not okay, Kenya said. Your husband of 28 years just blew up your entire life. You're allowed to not be okay. I'm booking a flight right now. I'll be there tomorrow. That night, I slept in the middle of the bed for the first time in decades. I spread out, taking up space that had always belonged to Marcus, and even though I cried myself to sleep, I also felt something I hadn't felt in years. I felt like myself, like Victoria, not Vicky, not Marcus's wife, not someone's mother, just me. The next morning, Denise came over with coffee and bagels and a plan. Okay, she said, we're filing your own divorce petition today, a real one with your real signature. We're going to expose everything Marcus did, the forgery, the hidden assets, the affair. We're going to make sure he doesn't get away with any of this. What if he tries to claim I'm being vindictive, or what if he tells people I'm making this up? He can try, Denise said, but we have evidence, Victoria. We have Dr. Morrison's forensic analysis, we have Sarah's investigation, we have bank records and phone records and photographs. We have the truth, and the truth is going to come out. Over the next few weeks, my life became a whirlwind of legal proceedings and investigations. Marcus hired an aggressive attorney who tried to claim I was being vindictive and unreasonable, but Denise was better. She presented Dr. Morrison's forensic analysis to the court, proving the signature was forged. She presented the evidence of Marcus's hidden bank account and his affair. She methodically dismantled every lie Marcus had constructed.
The court was not sympathetic to Marcus. The judge, a stern woman in her 60s with no patience for deception, ordered Marcus to turn over all financial records from the past 10 years. She ordered him to pay for my legal fees. She ordered him to move out of the house permanently. And she set a trial date for the actual divorce proceedings. But the real vindication came when the district attorney's office got involved. Forgery of legal documents is a crime, and when the evidence was presented to them, they decided to prosecute Marcus. Suddenly, my cheating husband wasn't just facing a messy divorce, he was facing potential criminal charges. I won't lie and say it was easy. There were days when I couldn't get out of bed, when the weight of betrayal was too heavy to carry. There were nights when I lay awake wondering what I'd missed, what signs I ignored, how I could have been so blind. But there were also moments of clarity and strength, moments when I realized I was going to survive this, that I was stronger than I'd ever known. Marcus tried to reach out several times, leaving voicemails and sending texts apologizing and asking for another chance. But I never responded. What was there to say? He'd made his choices, and now he had to live with the consequences. The investigation into Marcus's finances revealed even more than we'd initially found. He didn't just have one secret bank account, he had three, totaling over $400,000. He'd been diverting money from our joint accounts for years, small amounts at first that grew larger over time. He'd also taken out a loan against his pension and hidden that money too. Amanda Stevens turned out to be more involved than anyone realized. She worked at a law firm that specialized in estate planning, and she'd helped Marcus set up the shell companies he used to hide his assets. She'd also been the one to suggest forging my signature on the divorce papers, according to phone records Sarah had obtained when the district attorney issued subpoenas. At the trial, Marcus's attorney tried to paint me as a controlling wife who'd driven Marcus into Amanda's arms. He tried to claim the money Marcus hid was his inheritance from a distant relative that he'd wanted to keep separate. But Denise destroyed every argument with evidence. Phone records, emails, bank statements, text messages between Marcus and Amanda discussing their plans. The judge ruled in my favor on almost everything. I got the house, 70% of the retirement accounts, and half of the money from the secret bank accounts. Marcus was ordered to pay alimony for 10 years and to reimburse me for all legal fees. The criminal charges for forgery were still pending, but Marcus's attorney was already trying to negotiate a plea deal. Through all of this, Kenya was my rock. She took time off work to stay with me, helped me sort through 28 years of marriage, helped me box up Marcus's remaining belongings and drop them off at Amanda's house, where he was now living permanently. We went through old photo albums together, and Kenya asked me questions about our marriage that I'd never really thought about. "Did you love him?" she asked one night as we sat on the back porch with wine. "I thought I did," I said. But looking back now, I wonder if I was in love with the idea of marriage more than with Marcus himself. We met so young. I was 24, he was 26. I didn't really know who I was yet. And I built my whole identity around being his wife. "You're more than that," Kenya said. "You're an amazing teacher and friend and mother. You're smart and funny and strong. You don't need him to be whole." "I'm starting to realize that," I said. The divorce was finalized 6 months after I found those papers. It was both the quickest and longest 6 months of my life. Quick because so much happened and everything moved so fast, but long because every day felt like I was living through something heavy and difficult that I couldn't escape. On the day the divorce became final, I went to the courthouse with Denise and Kenya. The judge signed the papers, made it official, and just like that, 28 years of marriage were over. I walked out of that courthouse feeling lighter than I had in years. That evening, Kenya and Denise threw me a divorce party at my house. They invited my close friends, people who'd supported me through everything. We drank champagne and ate cake that said "New Beginnings" and laughed and celebrated not the end of my marriage, but the start of my new life. One of my friends asked if I was angry at Marcus, if I hated him for what he'd done. And I had to think about that for a minute. I'm not angry anymore. Angry takes too much energy, and I don't want to give him any more of my energy. I feel sorry for him, actually. He threw away a good marriage and a family for what? For Amanda Stevens, who's now involved in his legal troubles? For money he had to spend on lawyers? For a criminal record that's going to follow him forever? He didn't win. He lost everything. What about you? Are you going to date again? Another friend asked. Maybe someday. But right now, I'm focusing on me. I'm figuring out who Victoria is when she's not defined by being someone's wife. It's scary, but it's also exciting. The criminal case against Marcus ended up being resolved with a plea deal. He pled guilty to 1 count of forgery and received 2 years probation, a hefty fine, and community service. His attorney tried to keep it out of the news, but word spread anyway. At his accounting firm, several clients dropped him, and he eventually had to resign. His relationship with Amanda didn't last either. According to Kenya, who'd heard from a friend, within a year of the divorce being finalized, they had broken up and Amanda had moved to another city. As for me, I threw myself into my work and my hobbies. I'd always loved painting, but I'd given it up years ago because I never had time. Now I took classes at the community college and discovered I was actually pretty good. I started going to therapy to work through the betrayal and the grief and the anger I'd been suppressing. I reconnected with old friends I'd lost touch with over the years. I also discovered something about myself. I liked being alone. I liked having the whole bed to myself. I liked decorating the house the way I wanted without having to compromise. I liked making decisions without consulting anyone. I liked the quiet and the peace and the freedom. About a year after the divorce was finalized, I was at the grocery store when I ran into Marcus. He looked older, somehow, smaller. He was with his cart and I was with mine, and for a moment we just stared at each other. "Hi, Vicky," he said finally. "It's Victoria," I corrected him. "Only my friends call me Vicky." "Right, Victoria," he said, looking uncomfortable. "Look, I know this is awkward, but I wanted to say I'm sorry for everything I put you through. I was wrong, and I know that now." I looked at this man who had been my husband for 28 years, who'd shared my bed and my life, who I trusted completely, and I felt nothing. No anger, no sadness, no longing, just nothing. "Thank you for the apology," I said. "But I've moved on, Marcus. I hope you've learned something from all this. I hope you become a better person." With that, I pushed my cart past him and continued my shopping. I didn't look back, didn't wonder what he thought or how he felt. I just kept moving forward, because that's what I'd been doing for the past year. Moving forward, one day at a time. Kenya came to visit a few months later, and we sat on the back porch like we'd done so many times before. "Mom, you seem different. Happier." "I am happier," I said. "It took me a long time to get here, but I am. You know what the strangest part is?" "What?" "I'm grateful,"
Kenya said, looking confused. Grateful for what? For Dad lying and cheating and destroying your marriage? No, I said. I'm grateful that I found those papers. Because if I hadn't, I might have spent the rest of my life in that marriage, never knowing the truth, never becoming the person I am now. Marcus didn't destroy my life. He freed me from a life I didn't even realize I didn't want. Kenya smiled. That's a really healthy way to look at it, Mom. I'm proud of you. I'm proud of me too, I said. 2 years after finding those divorce papers, I was at a community art show displaying some of my paintings. A man about my age with kind eyes and a warm smile stopped in front of one of my pieces. It was a painting of a woman standing at the edge of a cliff, looking out at the ocean, her arms spread wide like she was about to fly. "This is beautiful," he said. "I'm Robert, by the way." "Victoria," I said, shaking his hand. "Your work is really powerful," Robert said. "There's something about this one in particular. It feels like freedom." "That's exactly what it is," I said. "Freedom. Hard won, but worth it." We talked for a while about art and life, and I learned that Robert was a widower who'd lost his wife to cancer 3 years ago. He was a retired teacher like me, and he'd taken up photography as a way to work through his grief. He asked if I'd like to get coffee sometime, and I surprised myself by saying yes. "I'm not looking for anything serious," I told him on our first coffee date.
I'm still figuring out who I am after my divorce. I'm not looking for anything serious either, Robert said. I'm still grieving my wife, but I'd like someone to talk to, someone who understands what it's like to start over later in life. We became friends first. Real friends, who could talk about anything. We went to museums and art galleries. We took walks in the park. We had long dinners where we discussed books and politics and our grown children. We didn't rush into anything. We just enjoyed each other's company. One day, about 6 months into our friendship, Robert asked me, "Victoria, do you think you'll ever trust someone enough to be in a relationship again?" "I don't know," I said honestly. "What Marcus did, it broke something in me, made me doubt my own judgment. How do I trust someone else when I couldn't even see what was happening in my own marriage?" Robert thought about that for a moment. He said, "I think that you have to remember it wasn't your fault. Marcus made a choice to deceive you. That doesn't mean everyone will do the same. And trusting again isn't about being naive. It's about being brave enough to be vulnerable even when you know it might hurt." "Are you brave enough?" I asked. He said, "I'm trying to be. Every day, I'm trying to be." Slowly, carefully, Robert and I started to become more than friends. It wasn't like my relationship with Marcus, which had been passionate and all-consuming in the beginning. This was quieter, steadier, built on a foundation of honesty and mutual respect. We talked about our fears and our pasts. We were honest about what we wanted and what we didn't want. I told Robert about finding the divorce papers, about the forgery and the affair, about how betrayed I'd felt and how long it had taken me to rebuild my sense of self. He listened without judgment, without trying to fix anything, just listened, and that meant everything. Robert told me about losing his wife, about the guilt he felt for moving forward without her, about how lonely he'd been and how he'd almost given up on the idea of ever connecting with someone again. We were two broken people who'd found each other, and somehow that made us both feel a little less broken. 3 years after finding those divorce papers, I was standing in my backyard at a small gathering of friends and family. Kenya was there with her boyfriend, Denise was there with her husband, Robert was there, standing next to me, holding my hand. It was my 55th birthday, and as I looked around at all these people who loved and supported me, I realized something important. I was happy. Truly, deeply, genuinely happy. In a way I'd never been during my marriage to Marcus. Kenya raised her glass to give a toast. "Mom, I want you to know how proud I am of you. 3 years ago, your whole world fell apart, and you could have become bitter. You could have given up. But instead, you became stronger, you became more yourself, and you showed me what real courage looks like." Everyone clinked their glasses, and I felt tears running down my face, but they were good tears. That night, after everyone had gone home, Robert and I sat on the back porch. I'd put up string lights and planted flowers everywhere, and the whole space felt magical. Robert said, "Victoria, I need to tell you something." "Okay," I said, feeling a little nervous. He said, "I love you. Not in a way that needs anything from you, not in a way that's trying to replace what you lost, but just in a way that appreciates who you are right now in this moment." I looked at this kind man who had come into my life when I least expected him, who had been patient with my fears and my healing, who had never pushed me to be anything other than myself. "I love you too," I said, "and I mean that. I really do." We sat there in comfortable silence, watching the stars come out, and I thought about how different my life was from what I'd planned. I thought I'd grow old with Marcus, thought we'd retire together, travel together, become grandparents together. But that future had been built on lies. This future, the one I was living right now, was built on truth. It was built on knowing myself, on standing up for myself, on refusing to accept less than I deserved. And somehow that made it so much better. Marcus tried to reach out one more time about 4 years after the divorce. He sent me a letter, an actual handwritten letter, saying that he'd been going to therapy and had realized how badly he'd treated me.
He said he'd lost his career, his reputation, his relationship with Kenya, and that he finally understood what he'd thrown away. He didn't ask for another chance. He just said he was sorry and that he hoped I'd found happiness. I read that letter once, and then I put it in a drawer. I didn't need his apology anymore. Didn't need his acknowledgement of what he'd done. I'd moved past it, moved past him, moved past the woman I'd been when I was married to him. I showed the letter to Robert and asked him if it made him uncomfortable that Marcus had reached out. "Not at all," Robert said. "Your past is part of who you are, and I love all of you, including the parts that were shaped by pain." That's when I knew for sure that what Robert and I had was real. Kenya got engaged to her boyfriend and asked me to help plan the wedding. As we sat looking at flower arrangements and venue options, she said, "Mom, I want you to know that I'm not scared of marriage because of what happened with you and Dad." "Why not?" I asked. "Because, honestly, I'm a little scared of marriage because of what happened." "Because you taught me what to look for," Kenya said. "You taught me that love isn't just about the good times. It's about honesty and respect and partnership. Dad didn't understand that, but you do. And you've shown me what real strength looks like." I hugged her tight, my beautiful daughter, who'd become such an incredible woman. At Kenya's wedding, Robert was my date. And when the DJ played a slow song, he held out his hand to me. "May I?" We danced, and I rested my head on his shoulder and felt completely at peace. "You know what I realized?" I said to Robert. "What's that?" "That finding those divorce papers was the best thing that ever happened to me." Robert pulled back to look at me. "Really?" "Really," I said. "Because they forced me to see the truth. They forced me to stop living in a comfortable lie and start living in an uncomfortable truth. And that truth set me free." "What are you free from?" Robert asked. "Free from trying to be perfect," I said. "Free from thinking I had to shrink myself to make someone else comfortable. Free from believing that my worth was tied to being someone's wife. I'm just Victoria now. Not Vicky, not Mrs. Anderson, just me. And I really like who that is." "I'm pretty fond of her too," Robert said with a smile. 5 years after finding those divorce papers, I was sitting in my classroom at Lincoln Elementary. It was the last day of school before summer break, and my 5th graders were signing each other's yearbooks and promising to stay in touch. One of my students, a quiet girl named Maya, came up to my desk. "Mrs. Anderson," she said, "I just wanted to say thank you for this year." "You're welcome, sweetie. But thank you for what, specifically?" "For showing us that it's okay to start over. My parents got divorced this year, and I was really sad. But you told us that story about how you started over after your divorce, and it made me feel like everything was going to be okay." I felt my eyes getting wet. "I'm so glad I could help you, Maya. And you're right, everything is going to be okay. It might take time, but it will be okay." Maya hugged me and then ran back to her friends. And I sat there thinking about how far I'd come from that day in my kitchen when I found those papers with my forged signature. That evening, I went home to my house, not our house, not Marcus's house, but mine. I'd redecorated it completely, painting the walls colors I loved, buying furniture that made me happy, planting a garden that was exactly what I wanted. It looked nothing like it had when Marcus lived there, and that was perfect. Robert came over for dinner. We cooked together, laughing and talking about our days. Afterward, we sat on the back porch, and he said, "Victoria, I have something I want to ask you." My heart started pounding because I thought I knew what was coming. But Robert surprised me. "I'm not asking you to marry me," he said, "and I want you to know that up front. I know you've been through hell with marriage, and I respect that." "Okay," I said, relieved and maybe just a tiny bit disappointed. "But I am asking if you'd consider living together. I know that's a big step, and I know you love your independence. But I love you, and I want to wake up next to you every morning. I want to share my life with you in whatever way you're comfortable with." I looked at this man who understood me, who respected my boundaries, who never pushed me to be anything other than myself. "Yes," I said, "I'd like that. But Robert, I have conditions." "Name them," he said.
I need my own space, I said. A room that's just mine where I can paint and think and be alone when I need to. Absolutely, Robert said. And we need us to be completely honest with each other. No secrets, no hidden bank accounts, no forged documents. Just total honesty always. I wouldn't have it any other way, Robert said. I sat there after hanging up with Denise and thought about everything that had happened: the discovery, the betrayal, the divorce, the healing, the new beginning. And I realized that I wouldn't change any of it, because all of it had led me here, to this life, to this version of myself that I genuinely loved. Robert came home and found me sitting quietly. "Victoria," he said, "what's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong," I said. "I just got some news about Marcus, but I'm okay. I'm actually more than okay." Robert sat down next to me. "Do you want to talk about it?" "Not really," I said, "but I do want to tell you something." "What's that?" "Thank you," I said, "for being patient with me, for understanding that I needed time to heal, for never making me feel like I had to be anyone other than myself. That's what love is, Victoria. Accepting someone exactly as they are." 7 years after finding those divorce papers, I was invited to speak at a women's conference about starting over after divorce. I almost said no because talking about such a painful part of my life seemed scary. But then I thought about Maya, my student, and all the other women who might need to hear that it's possible to rebuild after everything falls apart. I stood on that stage in front of hundreds of women and told my story about finding the papers with the forged signature, about the hidden money and the affair, about the divorce and the healing and the new life I'd built. When I was finished, there was silence for a moment, and then the entire room stood up and applauded. Women came up to me afterward with tears in their eyes, telling me their own stories of betrayal and survival, and I realized that my pain had purpose, that by sharing it, I was helping others find their own strength. One woman, probably in her 60s, came up to me and said, "I've been married for 40 years to a man who treats me like I'm invisible. I've been too scared to leave because I don't know who I am without him. But listening to you, I realize I need to find out." I took her hands and looked into her eyes. "It's never too late," I said, "to become who you're meant to be. It's scary and hard, but it's worth it." That night, Robert and I celebrated with dinner at our favorite restaurant. "I'm so proud of you," Robert said. "You took your pain and turned it into something that helps other people. That's real courage." "I don't feel very courageous. Most days, I still feel like I'm figuring things out." "That's what courage is," Robert said. "Moving forward even when you're scared, even when you don't have all the answers." 8 years after the divorce, I was in my art studio working on a painting when Kenya called. "Mom," she said, her voice excited, "I have news." "What is it?" I asked. "I'm pregnant. You're going to be a grandmother." I dropped my paintbrush, tears streaming down my face. "Oh, honey, that's wonderful." Kenya and her husband came to visit the next weekend, and as we talked about baby names and nursery colors, Kenya said, "Mom, I want to ask you something." "Anything," I said. "Will you tell my child about what you went through? Not all the details, but about how you started over after divorce, about how you found yourself. I want my kid to know that it's never too late to choose yourself." "Of course," I said. "I'll tell them everything." That night, I lay in bed next to Robert, thinking about the grandchild who was coming, and about the lessons I wanted to pass on. Not lessons about bitterness or mistrust, but lessons about resilience and self-worth, and the courage to start over when necessary. Robert rolled over and said, "You're thinking pretty hard over there. What's on your mind?" "I'm thinking about everything. About how scared I was 8 years ago when I found those papers,
and how different my life is now. Better or worse? So much better. Because I'm living authentically now. I'm not pretending to be happy. I actually am happy. I'm not trying to be someone I'm not. I'm just me. That's all any of us can do. Just be ourselves and love people who let us do that. 9 years after the divorce, I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. Hello? Vicky? It's Marcus. I haven't heard from him in years, and hearing his voice was strange, like listening to a recording from another lifetime. It's Victoria. What do you want, Marcus? He paused. I heard you're going to be a grandmother. Congratulations. Thank you, I said. How did you know? Kenya posted it on social media. I still follow her, even though she doesn't follow me back. Look, I know I don't have the right to ask, but I was wondering if I could meet my grandchild when they're born. I took a deep breath. Marcus, that's between you and Kenya, not me. But I will tell you this. If you want to be part of this child's life, you need to be honest. You need to be reliable. You need to be the kind of grandfather that you were never a father to Kenya. Can you do that? I don't know, Marcus said honestly, but I want to try. I've lost so much, Victoria. I don't want to lose this, too.
Then prove it, I said. Show up consistently, be honest about your past, don't make promises you can't keep, and, most importantly, respect Kenya's boundaries. She gets to decide what kind of relationship she wants with you. I understand, Marcus said. There was a pause, then, Victoria, I really am sorry for everything. I know, Marcus, I said, and I've forgiven you, not for your sake, but for mine. I'm not carrying that anger anymore. After I hung up, I told Robert about the conversation. How do you feel? He asked. I feel nothing, I said. No anger, no sadness, no longing, just nothing. And that feels like freedom. When Kenya's baby was born, a beautiful little girl named Rose, I was in the delivery room holding Kenya's hand. And when the doctor placed that tiny perfect baby in Kenya's arms, I felt a love so pure, it took my breath away. This is Rose, Kenya said, holding her daughter up so I could see her better. Rose Victoria, named for both of her grandmothers. I started crying. Mom, Kenya said, you taught me how to be strong, how to stand up for myself, how to choose myself. And I want to teach Rose the same things. You will, I said. You're going to be an amazing mother. Marcus did eventually meet Rose, but only after Kenya set very clear boundaries. He could visit once a month, supervised, and he had to be sober and honest about his past. To his credit, he followed all of Kenya's rules, and slowly, very slowly, they started to rebuild some kind of relationship. But that was Kenya's journey, not mine. My journey was about continuing to grow and evolve and become more fully myself. 10 years after finding those divorce papers, Robert and I were sitting on our back porch watching the sunset. He took my hand and said, Victoria, do you remember what you said to me when we first met? That you were figuring out who you were? I remember, I said. Have you figured it out? He asked. I smiled. I'm still figuring it out, I said, but I know this much. I'm someone who survived. I'm someone who chose herself when it would have been easier to stay small. I'm someone who found love again, but not because I needed it, because I wanted it. I'm someone who turned pain into purpose and regret into growth. That's pretty good, Robert said. It is good, I said. It's really good. As the sun set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink and purple,
I thought about that day 10 years ago when I found those divorce papers with my forged signature. I thought about how terrified I'd been, how my whole world had shattered, and how certain I was that I'd never be happy again. But I was wrong. I was happier now than I'd ever been. Not despite what happened, but in some strange way because of it. The divorce had forced me to become someone I might never have otherwise. It had given me the gift of knowing myself, truly, deeply, completely. And that was worth everything. I looked at Robert, at this man who loved me without trying to change me, who supported my independence while also being fully present in my life. Thank you, I said, for being here, for loving me, for letting me be myself. That's easy, Robert said. Loving you is the easiest thing I've ever done. We sat there as the stars came out, holding hands in comfortable silence, two people who'd both survived loss and pain and had found each other on the other side. And I realized that this moment right here, was what happiness looked like. Not perfect, not without scars or memories of pain, but real and honest and true. 10 years ago, I found divorce papers with my signature, but I never signed anything. And that discovery, even though it was devastating at the time, had led me here, to this life, to this love, to this version of myself, and I wouldn't change a single thing. Because sometimes the worst thing that happens to you becomes the best thing that ever happens to you. It just takes time and courage and a willingness to let go of who you thought you were supposed to be so you can become who you actually are. I'm Victoria, I'm 62 years old, and I'm finally exactly where I'm supposed to be.